Hi everyone, thank you so much to those of you who've come here live and those of you who are watching on repeat. This is Finding the Why. It is for artists by artists, hosted by myself, Kirstie Tebbs, and Sarah Hardy. And tonight we have joined with us a very special guest, Vitor Schietti, who's joining us from Spain, is it?
Yes, Barcelona, Spain.
Yes. And Finding the Why is here to really go and combat the elite systems that is within the art world. And we meet every week. We have bi-weekly guests where we just talk about everything art. So Sarah, how has your week been?
My week's just been spent readjusting, really. Obviously, I'm back home and catching up with things. So yeah, I'm sorting through, the photos that I took while I was away. Obviously, I've got plenty of landscapes and of the dramatic coastline of Northern Ireland, which has been great. I had my birthday, so that was quite exciting. Going out and trying to find a gluten-free, dairy-free birthday cake for myself, and yeah, kind of getting back into my usual training. So it's been good. It's been productive, I think. But how about you?
Yeah, I mean, my week has been up and down. I managed to sign contracts on Monday to be able to have the Petri Dish project. The gallery is running next week for 8 days, I think it is, down in London, Spitalfields. And then to be able to put on the Canvas project physical exhibition for 5 days at the start of September as well, which the announcement for that Canvas one will be coming out soon. I've spent today making the last of the poem books, which are on sale. There's only a couple left now, so if you want one, go and get one. So it's been a busy week trying to get everything sorted, like labels sorted, transport for Monday, and being able to get a parking spot in London, central London, which is not the easiest. So we're hiring out a driveway instead, which from a very kind lady. Vitor, how has your week been?
It's pronounced Victor. It's like Victor without the C, but
Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah, it's been reasonably busy too. I've been training rock climbing more this week because next week I'm gonna do a short rock climbing trip, so I want to get back into shape. We're always struggling to maintain the level. It's so hard with this sport, but I'm so passionate about it. And budgeting some stuff for video services, photos that are coming up perhaps. And here in Barcelona right now, the Fiestas de Gracia are happening, which is kind of like their carnival. It's a neighborhood party where like the streets are decorated and people go through the streets rather than you have like a decorated car going through a street full of people. It's kind of the other way around. So, and there's live music, surprisingly open to the pandemic times we're still living. So I've been also enjoying that pretty much every night since Saturday.
That sounds really exciting. I wish we could do stuff like that in our streets.
There are a lot of English tourists here, by the way. I think the majority of the tourists at this time of the year are from England.
Ah,
Okay, cool. We'll be there next year then.
yeah.
Yes, hopefully. I'll show you around the Fiestas de Gracia. Come at this time, which is a good time to be around.
Yes. So this week, well, today is World Photography Day. And there's two main articles that we just want to highlight this week. The first one is from the National Geographic. It is the longest exposure known that was made from a makeshift camera that was forgotten about. So photographer Regina Valkenburg, or otherwise known as Reggie, was a technician at University of Hertfordshire. She attached a cameraless camera onto the Bravery Observatory over at the University of Hertfordshire and forgot about it, and 8 years later found it, and with immense skill has managed to save the photographic paper that was inside of it, upload it onto her computer and be able to edit it, so then you're able to see this beautiful image that you can see now on the screen. So what is cameraless photography? Cameraless photography is you're literally taking a photo without a camera, which madness if you think about it. So the way that she did it was with a 500 milliliter Copperberg can. She put Ilford multigrade photographic paper inside of it and used a pin to create a hole. And what happens is the paper then captures the scene in front of it in reverse. It literally burns a hole into the paper. Usually you only do it for 5 minutes if you 5 minutes to maybe a couple of hours. Some people go slightly longer, but 8 years is pretty much unheard of, because at that point you'd expect the paper to be completely destroyed by the sun.
Yeah, that's quite amazing. I was reading about the average time that it could be exposed from, and it's anywhere between 5 seconds to several hours, depending on the size of the hole that's created. But to actually be able to preserve it and not have, the usual deterioration and fall to bits during the processing's quite something. It's incredible.
Yeah, this reminds me of Michael Waisley. Probably, I don't know if you're going to show up some of his work too. It has to
I've
do
not,
with
but I
that.
have heard of him. He's great, isn't he?
Yeah, he did that with the construction of MoMA in New York. So he had more than one camera, or like you said, more like cans with a very small hole in it. And he left it there for 3 years, and you could see the building being built. So you have a transparent building because you see before it was built and during and after. It's an amazing project too. It's not as long as this one. This is even more impressive.
It's phenomenal, this idea of using solarography as a way of capturing photos. And even in Regina's words, is the invisible has been captured and erased the visible. So you can literally see the buildings and the natural environment, but the people disappear. The things that are there every single day that almost like litter the landscape just disappeared.
I can see how this is right up your street, Kirstie, with that kind of, I suppose, almost element of quantum.
Yes, I am such a fan of this sort of photography, and it's been great to know Regina personally. She was a technician at the university I've studied at. Even went to Berlin with her and heard more about her photography practice. Absolute phenomenal woman, and so worth looking into if you've never heard of her before. The next article I will pass over to Sarah.
So this one has been brought about by the National Photographic Journal. I think I've got that right. But it's based on an African-based collective that's been formed during COVID. And basically, because the usual means of displaying art and photography have been taken away, they've had to be a little bit more innovative. But they've actually found a new way of doing things during COVID that has allowed them that extra exposure that they wouldn't normally get. And I suppose one of the things that has happened, in certain countries and around the world is that certain artists don't get a fair exposure and they're kind of overlooked. So they have found a friend in COVID in that way. And its kind of aim has been to kind of present work and to connect artists, connect photographers across the continent and create that sense of community, which is really important. We're all there to support each other, and obviously this collective, they support each other massively. And increase global visibility as well. So kind of providing opportunities to be seen where they wouldn't normally be. It was created by Dr. Julie Bonzon. I think I've got that pronounced that right, who was a photographic historian. And it is a not-for-profit organization, and it's not gallery represented at all either. So, there is quite a bit of autonomy in it. But yeah, it's kind of amazing the work that's being produced. And as you can see by this image here, it just kind of is mind-blowing really when you look at it. But there are artists from Ethiopia, from South Africa, Nigeria, Egypt, and topics that have been covered are kind of history and geographical, elements of kind of experience of trauma, memory, gender. So, a lot of, I suppose, subjects that kind of have been taboo in the past, but, they've kind of been given this opportunity to share their work based on that and experiences also. So yeah, it's a very cool idea, actually.
It's just so amazing how someone has just decided to create this because of lockdown and be able to spread it across the world and give it the exposure so quickly that a lot of these artists don't necessarily have before then. It's just showing that that just because you're underrepresented or you're from somewhere that is not quite first world country, it just shows that there's still that artistic excellence within the community and work that actually deserves to be seen across the world. And I hope that it's given them sales and helped with their livelihood to keep the lights on, really. It really does blow my mind the way that it's just scaled so quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. They have an Instagram account, so you can find their work on Instagram. We'll try and find the tagline for that, but I'm assuming it would be African-based photographic collective. They have been presented at the Contemporary African Art Fair in London and also the Lagos Photographic Festival as well. So they're definitely, a group to be watched out for. So,
and because it's National World Photography Day, not just national, world. We're going to talk a little bit about the exposure triangle, because what's the point in a podcast if we can't actually teach you something that you may never have known before? I'm not the best at photography. I can appreciate it, and so this is really aimed for you beginners, intermediates, and even those of you who are professional who have just self-taught. I hope that you can take something from this. So what is the exposure triangle? Well, to be able to get a good quality photo, there are 3 different aspects that you need to think about: the ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. Sarah, what is ISO?
ISO, what is ISO? Well, ISO is the camera's or the lens's sensitivity to light. And the higher the ISO, the brighter the picture is going to be. The lower the ISO, the darker the picture is going to be. Of course, within this resolution triangle, there are 3 elements which impact each other. So when you adjust one, invariably, sometimes you're going to have to adjust the other. Now, a great way to remember these elements is, I heard the analogy the other day about sunscreen. So you have ISO, which is your sensitivity to light, and you can think of that as a very, very high SPF sun cream that you put over as a last resort.
If we connect the ISO to the first photograph of your article, the one that lasted for 8 years, so that photo can only be possible in a chemical process, because there's no digital ISO capable of being exposed for such a long time. So I bet the photographer there, not only she made a very, very small hole, which was a very small aperture, but she also had the material or the sensitive paper done in a way that the ISO could be even lower than 100. I'm not sure which ISO it was, but maybe it was 25 or I don't know, 50 or even less. And that's achieved by the chemicals, right? So that when you go to digital, the digital simulates that by giving less or more sensitivity to your CCD. And yeah, that's the ISO. I just like to connect with because ISO is something that I'm a big fan of long exposure, as we will see, and yeah, it's an important part of it to make it right. And there's an optimum place there, which is not even 100 and not also on the other end of the triangle.
Yeah,
that's, I think, really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing as well you have to watch out for, I is the noise and the graininess when you adjust the ISO, which can be quite apparent. It kind of, it depends on the clarity that you want. You can either have it sharp, or if you adjust it too much, then you can have that graininess. So it's kind of learning about that as well.
I mean, the grainy is a possibility of language too. You can choose to have a more grainy image if that's what you're conveying in your concept, or no, you prefer to have more clarity, so you have to go to a lower ISO. So not necessarily using a small ISO during a sunny day is the correct answer. It's just an option, which is more intuitive, but it's not an unbreakable rule.
With aperture, is that just the size of the actual lens?
And the aperture you could think about as sunscreen, and it affects the depth of field, and you would adjust that for your aperture priority. Basically, what am I saying? The larger the aperture, the more focus you're going to have, and the smaller the aperture, the shallower. And if you get an object in focus, but you've got kind of blurry background, so it is good for things like portraiture. The latter, kind of the large focus, pan out, and you have great big seascapes, skyscapes, landscapes.
The blades that control that aperture when you take a photograph, right? So if you didn't have the aperture, the opening would be 2.8 or whatever the aperture of that lens is when it's fully open. So because you have the blades there, and you set my aperture for this photo will be f/8. So when you take the photo, the blades will come closer to form a smaller hole, right? So it depends. Like some lenses will have apertures varying from 2.8 to 22, like that case, but others will have even less, which is like 1.8 or 1.4 even, which is very wide, very big aperture, and even down to 40 something. Like you can get an even smaller hole than 22, which is getting close to that can for the 8 years. That was the aperture probably of for sure above f/22. So it was an even smaller hole that they used for that camera, or that non-camera.
I think that, a really interesting point with all of these all of this information is it depends how you creatively interpret it, which we kind of touched on there. With the aperture, it kind of depends on what kind of focus you're trying to achieve as well. Do you want a kind of a completely clear picture? Do you want the background to be blurry and the subject to be really crystal clear? Or I think that there are variables and that are open to interpretation of how you use these elements, within the exposure triangle.
I think that's a good point to keep in mind, is knowing what your outcome is to how you actually want to use it. And shutter speed, that's just the speed at which the shutter shuts. Victor, did you want to say a bit more about how you can use shutter speed?
Oh, that's my favorite part of photography, the shutter speed, because I enjoy exploring low shutter speed. So that means the camera is being exposed for a longer period of time. Shutter speed is the amount of time your CCD or in an analog camera, the film is being exposed to the image ahead of you. So the longer it is exposed, then more light is coming in, and you have to compensate that with the aperture and ISO. But that also allows you to capture the passage of time, right? So the shutter speed of that first picture was 8 years. Usually the shutter speeds that we have on the cell phone are probably around 1/5 of a second, or even faster, like 1/100th of a second. So that's very fast. So yeah, that's shutter speed.
Yeah, I've got kind of, the slower it is, it's more kind of suitable for taking pictures in low light and creating special effects and capturing movement. again, kind of, you know, personal interpretation about what you want to achieve is vital when you're kind of deciding on how to use your camera and the elements that that you have available to you. And the faster, you know, you can choose to kind of, I suppose, almost freeze frame things, and that would come with the faster shutter speed. And when we were looking at these articles, it kind of gave examples of, you know, trying to capture a surfer or a bird that was in flight, but just actually freeze framing it rather than having that blur of the movement. And I think they said for the surfer, I think they used 1/4,000, and the bird was 1/1,000, which is kind of substantially faster than, you know, what you would kind of use to blur the movement of that, if that makes sense.
Yes. I think there's been such an abundance of information for those who are wanting to start out on photography. I know I've learnt something, so I hope everyone else has. Victor, did you have any artworks you would like to show?
I have many artworks to show. Which one would you like me to start with?
Or surprise us?
Surprise. Okay, so I'm not going to show the ones right now. We'll show it later. That is the main reason why I was invited. I will start with another project. So, well, let's, like the second picture that you showed, the one from Africa, which is amazing. And as Kirstie said about, like, we sometimes miss out the amount of wonderful artists that are in Africa, and they don't get the right visibility just because they're not part of the European and North American circuit, which is a shame. We should pay more attention to artists coming from there. And that was a double exposure, right? So I really enjoyed producing this series, which is multiple exposures, not only two, but usually between 5, or some of them are 3 exposures, some are 5, most of them are 5, and some are up to 9. Not many, but I have a few 9 examples too. And what I do is I set the camera to, most of the cameras nowadays, they have this option where you can simulate as if it was analog camera, where you take a picture and the film is not passed, so you're still with the same frame that you had on the first exposure, and then when you take the second picture, it adds up to the previous one. And you have to be watchful for that, because if you expose both of them correctly, so if you set the exposure in the center for your pictures, they're gonna add, and then it's gonna be overexposed. So when you take these pictures that are multiple, you have to sub-expose them, which means you would take dark images using either a higher shutter speed than the usual for that scenario, or closing the aperture more than what's recommended to have the exposure in the middle. And by then you add these dark images, and then it creates a finely exposed image. And that's what I did while visiting several cities between 2016 and, well, nowadays still when I go to a new city, I do that. So they are all done in camera. It's not something I do in Photoshop later. And then I try to walk through the city and capture things that can compose with the previous image in an attempt to tell a story, to tell something about the environment where I am. And I call the series Extended Moments, because it's as if I would get one moment and I would extend it into several moments and then compress them into one single image. So here, for example, there's this lady checking her mail. I was so happy to witness that while I was strolling by. This is in Lisbon. All these pictures that I'm showing are taken in Lisbon. And I'm not sure if this was the first picture or the second, but then I combined, or I had already taken a photo of some tiles there. Lisbon is very famous for its tiles. And this is also one of my favorites of Lisbon. So I had this man taking a nap in a public bench. And then I have an overview of Lisbon, and I also have another view of a place nearby. So they're all taken within the spread of a few minutes, sometimes 1 minute, 2 minutes, could be even up to 30 minutes while I'm walking around. And they give this, I like to create like the memory of a place, you know, like the colors and the shapes, but not so much one place specifically. You know, for me, it's more like the mood of the city spread across different perspectives than having like one iconic view of that city. For example, this one is in Rome, inside the Colosseum. Also in Rome, but in a different part of the ancient parts of the city. And as I said, all of these are from 3 to 5 images.
It's an incredibly creative way to pull memories together. It's just mind-blowing. I'm just totally transfixed by it.
I like it because if you see it very big, like these pictures are meant to be seen, like I would love to print them on my largest size that I usually do, which is 1/2 by 1.5 meters. And because then you can see the small details of something that, you know, like this one, for example, I have an image done inside the bar where you had drinks in the walls and the chandelier. And then outside the street, I had this view of these buildings. And then I walked a little bit more. I had another view. These, I think, are probably 3 images only. Let me see another interesting city from this series. So I have 13 cities done already. I'm not going to go through all of them. Venice is an interesting one too.
Which was your favorite city to work in?
Yeah, Venice was one of my favorites. I think, yeah. Let me see the list so I can give you more. Okay, Paris was incredible. And New York, Barcelona, where I'm based. I'll show you just 2 more. So I'll show you Paris and Venice. They're all on my website, by the way, like not 100% of these, but a sample of each city there. So here's like you have those typical gondola riders, and then another view of the channel from the outside. At the time here, there's a small detail that you probably miss if I don't say anything. It's during the Biennale of the Arts Biennale in Venice in 2017. We had this installation of a gigantic hand reaching out from the sea, and it's about global warming, like the sea level rising. So that's also part of this memory of Venice.
Yeah. Incredible. I've only been there once, and I don't even know where my photographs are.
I'm so glad that we're seeing Venice. It's literally 3 years ago today I got engaged in the middle of St. Marco's Square. It's bringing back so many memories. Just
oh, really? You got engaged there?
Yeah.
Wow, that's very special. Look, I think this one is taken in the St. Marco's Square, right? Like this tower,
this big church. Yeah.
And this is one of my favorites. It was taken during the sunset, and the colors were actually like that. I don't do much manipulation in these pictures. I might like enhance the contrast a bit, but I don't oversaturate things. I try to keep it close to natural. Of course, it's not 100% natural because we're always tweaking something, but yeah, I don't create something new. I just manipulate what's already there. Let me show you Paris. I haven't been to London yet since I started this series, so it's on my list. I have to go back to London. I've only been there like when I was 14. It's been a while. So yeah, Paris is also an incredible city to just walk around, and so many interesting things going on. Ancient, new, Montmartre.
Incredible. I was reading somewhere, especially kind of with your latest collection, that you only have a certain period of time during the day to produce the photographs because of the lighting. You have an optimum time.
Yeah, that's for the impermanent sculpture series. I'll show you.
Did you find that with this, were there elements that you had to factor in with this collection too?
Not as much, because this collection allows me to photograph at any time of the day. It could be in the morning, but of course, between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m., depending if it's winter or summer, but let's consider summer. It's usually not the ideal light. So most of the pictures I take during the golden hour, or if I get up really early, which is less likely than during that period. This one, for example, I had like this street artist playing in one of the bridges, and then you have the view of the bridge itself. I like to combine portraits with the environment. When I can do that successfully, that's when I really think I got a unique, like very interesting picture, like the one of that guy sleeping in the bench in Lisbon. This is one of my favorites from Paris, because I had this couple walking hand to hand, and then I meshed them with the Notre Dame as also if it was like a double entity, like holding hands somehow, you know.
Yeah, it brings it together beautifully.
Thank you. Also, this one was very, and it's always very interesting to go. I love doing street photography like that because it just sets me on the present moment, and I'm always looking out for what can I photograph, what can I incorporate into this composition. And I was walking through Paris when there came this group of rollerbladers. It was about over 50 or 100 of them, really a lot. So I was like, okay, I have to put one of them into this composition, but I can only take one photo of them because it already merges with the previous one, right? So I can't just like take a bunch of them and then select which one goes best. And I couldn't take this one, which is, this movement is very, very strong. Yet the focus is a bit wrong. If you like this picture by its own wouldn't be that great because he's not very sharp. The focus is behind him. It was a difficult situation to focus properly. But because you have the rest of the elements, I don't think it really bothers. So yeah, that was impermanent sculptures.
Yeah.
No, sorry, that was extended moments. Yeah, impermanent sculptures, something else.
They were phenomenal, they were.
Thank you.
It's all phenomenal. But learning about the process that you use as well, I mean, that's a totally different education in itself as opposed to what you just learn about a camera and how to use a camera in a very generic way. You know, this is like pure creation and pretty much genius, really, as far as I'm concerned anyway.
Yeah, I like to explore when the camera offers that kind of possibility. Not all cameras do, but it's more common now to find multiple exposure settings, and you can set from 2 to 9 usually. So I would just recommend for those who have a camera with that to try it out. And there's also usually more than one mode to use it. The most common and the one that better replicates the analog process is called additive process, because as I said, it adds on the exposures of the previous pictures. But some cameras also offer another mode called average, which is like you can actually take the picture on the correct exposure and then the camera will blend them, making an average of that, and then it's not going to be overexposed. But that involves a bit more of an artificial approach rather than the other method, which is more like close to what an analog process could be if you're using a film. And then it sets your mind to just underexpose things. It's a bit different. The experience of photographing it using the additive mode, which is what I recommend, in which I did all of these pictures, and the average mode, which is more like it's kind of having the camera on the auto mode, you know, like it takes away a bit of your effort and your intentionality because it doesn't give you as much control.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do a lot of hiking, and actually, you know, taking the camera off the auto mode and being able to play with the exposure, you get some amazing results, like very, very ethereal. And obviously, you know, kind of depending on the natural light situation as well. It's just a really, really nice way to work. And you're right, it kind of, it gives you a bit more of a license to play, I guess.
Yeah, just experiment sometimes. I think I usually say, and I have a course on long exposure, multiple exposure, and first thing I say is that everybody is an artist in potential. It's just a matter of practice, of experimenting. It's not something special, you know, like there are not people that are better than the others, just people that put more effort and time doing something, and then they became better, and that's it. Anyone can achieve that. This is in Oslo, also one of I like the graffitis there. It's very confusing. But I don't know how much time we have. Maybe should I move on to the other one?
As much time as you want.
We've got all night.
But I don't know, maybe you have questions too, or
We have lots of questions. Yes, we have lots of questions as well.
you tell me, should I show impermanent sculptures or answer questions, or?
Yeah, let's have a look at your impermanent sculptures, because I really enjoyed that series.
Okay. So it started in 2015. The first one probably was like this or this. I was just testing out my idea to see like what the balance would. Let me just start from the beginning. Okay, yeah, so this was probably the first day I went out to do this. And yeah, I was trying out how much, what was the perfect equilibrium between aperture, ISO, and speed. And usually the speeds are very long. Like ideally, if I can have a 30 seconds exposure, it's kind of ideal, but not always it's possible, because I do them before it's completely dark. I do them when there's still some sunlight, so that I can capture also the ambient light, right? So, and I also use a filter, a neutral density filter in front of the lenses, to allow me for that longer exposure without compromising. For example, if I would close the aperture a lot, if I would use a 22 as aperture, then I could also achieve a longer period. But most lenses, they work optimally. Their optimal aperture is around 8 to 11. So you want to keep on that if you're worried about like having everything sharp and a correct depth of field. You can go over or lower depending on your intentions, but like 8 is around what's best for most of the lenses. So to use that, and also to use lower ISO, but that would also allow me to capture the ambient light, because again, if I use a 100 ISO in a place in this particular time, okay, the lights would be okay, but the ambient light would be not as strong, so it would be too dark. So I was finding the balance between what are the optimal settings, right? And so then I go with a sparkle, like I have you know those things you put over a birthday cake,
yeah,
and it creates sparkles. In Brazil, I could find one that produces a very long tail, and while living here in Spain, I haven't found one like that available in common stores. The ones that they have for birthday cakes here, they're much shorter. Actually, in Brazil too, but in Brazil you have this like superpower sparkle that allows for that effect, because it drops for longer distance, so it creates this cascade of fire. And then I go with a rod that allows me to reach higher, and I just go drawing around, usually trees. Trees are the most common subject of the series, or sometimes by hand. In this one, I was holding the sparkle in my hand, and I was jumping around that place in Chapada dos Veadeiros. It's called Vale da Lua, or the Moon Valley. And it's this amazing place where you have water going through rocks in that organic way. And this was also one of the first times I tried it outside of that lake that I showed you the first example. And then I have to usually combine more than one, because I can't cover the whole area that I want to in one single shot. Even if it's 30 seconds, sometimes it's not enough time for me to cover all the parts that I intend to. This photo is only 2 pictures combined, which is kind of half-half. And I think both of pictures took 30 seconds, but other pictures would be a composition of even 10 or 20 small parts, depending on how much time I had to expose each image. So if I started doing something earlier, so like if I started at 6 p.m., I had this amount of light and I can only use a 5 seconds exposure. If I use more, everything will be too bright. And but for some reason, I think that starting at 6 p.m. for that place would be better than waiting more. So that's what determines how many images I will combine later. If it was 2 images of 30 seconds or even more of 30 seconds, then usually I only combine 2 or 3. Or if it was many images of shorter amounts of time.
So do you shoot using a tripod and set a timer?
Yeah, exactly. Or if I have a friend with me to help, which sometimes I do, then I ask him to just press the shutter, because then I coordinate, like when I fire the sparkles, then I can ask, okay, go now, rather than have it. But if I'm alone, which I am in actually most cases I am alone, and then I just put the timer on the camera to keep taking pictures continuously. Like I set the time that I want. Like for example, this one is one that took 42 images and they all had like 5 to 8 seconds. I had to shift as it got darker. I could use longer exposure times, but I started with 5 seconds and I ended with, maybe the last one had even 20 seconds. And then I combined the small bits of it on Photoshop. So that's the Photoshop behind it. I don't create something that was not photographed. I don't like digitally create sparkles. I just blend them together. That's the only manipulation that these pictures have.
Oh, that's incredible. How close to the actual subject do you get? Or is it just a case of standing in front of the camera and...
Well, I go close to the trees with this rod. I can show you a video later if you want.
Oh yeah.
And then I go like drawing. And the reason why you don't see me is because I am usually also wearing dark clothes and I'm moving around. So there's no light in me directly. And because it's a long exposure, that's enough to blur me so that you don't see my presence. Although in some cases you can see like a ghost of me holding the stick when I stood there for a longer period. And then what I do is I edit that out. I mask that out, right? So because I have many pictures with the camera on the tripod, whenever I have myself as a ghost, which happens eventually, I will not use that part of that picture in the final composition.
Right, okay.
So these were all from the first year of the project, 2015. And then I kept going because I got some international recognition at that year. And it was a project that was really making me very interested in developing more. So in this case, for example, also in that last picture of the white tree with the pink background, and in this one, I not only I have the sparkles, but I also have a strobe flash firing the trees so that I could get the color of the tree stronger than just with the light coming from the sparkles. So these trees are actually dead yellow during daylight. And
yeah, the contrast is quite striking there. And I like the way you've got like the blur of the lights in the background as well.
Yeah, because then if you have cars passing by, you have that effect.
Yeah.
And that's a plus.
Makes
this
it...
one was very big. Like this tree was gigantic. So if you pay attention to the size of the sparkles compared to this one, and here it's the same sparkles, right? So you see how small it is here and how more visible it is. That gives you, so I was in the middle, I was like standing in the middle here with a rod. I even climbed a little bit more. Sometimes I have to climb the trees. Some of them I don't have to climb, some of them I climb. Even with the rod in a 3 meters extension of that rod, I could not reach the upper part of the tree, which I would like to.
Wow.
This one was done with a drone, and I don't really count this as a successful image. I think it's pretty messy and it didn't turn out as I wanted. But yeah, I just like to show it sometimes to say that we also make mistakes and we try things that don't work, but we only know until we try it, right? So my idea here was to have like the drone going around the trees in a spiral, but it was very hard for the drone pilot to drive it at dark with flashing sparkles coming out of it while it flies in between three gigantic trees. It didn't manage to do what we had envisioned. I don't blame him. He did as good as it can be, I guess. But yeah, the result is kind of not that great. This one is more simple, and I think it's a very good one.
That's beautiful. That's really gorgeous. So kind of just by the by, obviously there's huge progression in your work. When you go on to a new project, do you have like a definitive idea of where you want to push it, or is it very much like an organic process that you just kind of, sometimes it's a happy accident and you kind of, it leads you off on a bit of a tangent that you want to explore?
Yeah, there's an interesting question about how much you plan, how much you are open to what's happening by chance. Of course, sometimes there are good things that happen if you're open to them, and I always welcome. I might find some, like for this one, for example, I asked a friend to draw whatever he wanted, and so usually it's me with the sparkle. This one is the only case. This and this, it's somewhere else anyway. So I didn't have the control over that process as much, and it came out really cool. So, but usually, like, most of my work is based on planning what I want, and yeah, not so this one I had a firework exploding above the scenario, so these sparkles coming from the sky are the explosion of a firework, and it was all very well planned, although the location itself I only found on that day going for location scouting and just counting with the goodwill of my friends who had to stay at the beach until much later hours than they would like to. This is also a firework explosion over the sea, and of course I had to aim the firework in almost horizontal line rather than upwards, because, and that's always a bit scary because this is a big boom, and so yeah, it's kind of, I have to be watchful when I do this series, but fortunately I never had any accidents. This is one of the most successful images of the series.
Phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
So here behind you have the light of the cars passing in the streets, and here above you can see well the leaves, because I also fired a strobe flash from close to the camera pointing upwards to bring back some information of these leaves that without this flash would be more like a dark silhouette, and I wanted to bring some information from there. That's also why I photographed during twilight rather than complete dark, because then the more information from natural light in the picture without competing with the power of the sparkle, the better for me, you know. But of course that it can't be very early either, because otherwise my sparkle will be kind of faint. So that's why the project only happens on a very strict amount of time, usually 30 minutes, and it only allows me to do one picture per day.
Wow. So kind of no kind of medium wise, I think, was it you started with watercolors and inks and drawing, which led you into photography, and you used to kind of merge the two. Can you tell us a bit more about that process?
Yeah, when I was young, I started as like painting. Watercolor was one of my favorites, and I'm gonna show you some of that which you're mentioning, which is false pensamento. Apex, where is it? So I started with watercolor before photography, but this series came out later. while I was already identifying myself as a photographer. And the way I do these ones is I paint, and then I photograph the watercolor, and then I blend it with pictures from skies. Sometimes I do the watercolor first, and then I take the picture. Other times I would take the picture and then create another watercolor to work on top of it. This one is a long exposure, so it's about 45 minutes exposure. That's why I have this star trail. And yeah, one thing led to the other. I starting from painting, from drawing, I think that influenced how I see photography too, because I like painting with photography as much as I can. Not only with the sparkles, I for a long time now play with long exposures, and then I blur the images by moving my camera, by doing zoom. I like playing with that, or by having the camera on a tripod and then let people walk, and then become these ghosts, or the water can become. So yeah, this is the watercolor blending with photography part. One of my projects that sometimes I should go back to.
Yeah. You're very heavily inspired by nature, but I kind of realize you also do a lot of portraiture as well. Would you say that's kind of, I mean, has any of this really come out? Because you work in advertising as well, producing work for ads. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, advertising. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, when people ask me, what do you photograph? For me, it's hard to say, because although, yes, I am the trees with light paintings guy, I don't like to stick to that label. And I like to explore photography in all its aspects. And then portrait photography is also something that I really enjoy. Advertising was good for me to learn to manipulate images, which I apply to other projects where I have a lot of photo montage. And to have also a lot of care with details, directing people. But then artistically, I had to go away from that universe. So yeah, when I stepped outside of the advertising world, I think the artistic side breathes better. But for sure, advertising and commercial photography in general helps me exploring portraits, for example, which is something that, yeah, I do enjoy.
And you're also a cultural manager at Esperança Institute of Art and Culture. You could probably pronounce that better than me.
Esperança, yeah, Esperança.
Yes.
I was for 3 years. It was my first job here in Barcelona, because I came from Brazil. I just wanted to immigrate to Europe. I wasn't even sure it was Barcelona. I was considering Amsterdam and Berlin. And when I came here, just like, okay, I gotta make it happen, but I want to learn something outside of photography, because I was already a photographer in Brasilia, and I wanted to change a little bit, not because I don't like photography, but just because I wanted to not rely on it to survive. And so I found this job there. It was amazing. I got to be on the backstages of a cultural center where so I produced with them and for them dozens of exhibitions, artistic residencies, yeah, all of theater plays, some music concerts. So all of that I had to produce, like the communication. I was also photographing the event itself, sometimes doing video, editing the video, doing social media, answering emails from the artists, hanging paintings on the walls, installing the sculptures. It was very intense, too intense, I would say.
It doesn't sound like you did much of that job.
And for the first 2 years, I actually lived inside the gallery, because they had this residency for artists and for the manager at the time, which was me. And it was, I mean, it was great. I'm very thankful. I'm proud to say I'm a manager of Esponcedo for 3 years. But yeah, it had to go for that amount of time. And then I just had to move on. And I just felt like this urge to go back to photography and to dedicate myself again to be a photographer full time, because being a manager of Esponcedo didn't allow me to be a photographer as much as I would like to. So yeah, there was a part of my life that I'm proud, I'm happy, but now it's something that I learned, and I'm back to photography full.
That's fantastic. And you were awarded PDN 2016 at Photo Annual Award. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, one of the many awards that I applied to, and that's something that I don't know. I'll tell to people out there, like, don't give up. I feel like giving up every year because the amount of contests that I get into, and I rarely ever get anything. Even after that award, that was in 2016. From there to this year, I've been to many others, and actually yesterday I won one in Brazil. I'm pretty happy about. But about that one, it was amazing because I was invited to go to the ceremony in New York, and I was just coming back from this Euro trip. I didn't expect to spend more money on an international trip, but I thought, when will I have the chance to go to New York to get an award for my photography? So I bought the tickets like in the same week. It was great to be there, and it brought me some more recognition. It didn't change much in my life professionally since then, but it's always good to have it, like, and not only my mom and friends find my work good, someone else in New York also found it, and they gave me an award for it. So yeah, it's a good experience.
Well done. Congratulations.
These are from this year. I was in Brazil in March, and while I was there, I just went out every night that I could, because as I said, I can only do one per night. So each one of these took one day to produce.
Mm-hmm. You've got a really good work ethic, and you're obviously really passionate about what you do. And sometimes it seem a little bit unfair when you see that in people, that they haven't made it further. But I so firmly believe, these are the people who will kind of grow, and then all of a sudden one day kind of they will become so exponentially big. We go, where they come from? But you put in so much work.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
Yeah, I'm working towards that goal there, to become one of those people. But so far, I mean, it's happening little by little. I think this podcast is part of it, and I'm very thrilled to be part of it, especially being the photographer day. It's an honor. But yeah, it's a process, right? Yeah, and those who made it worldwide, who are famous, for sure they didn't do it from one day to the next. They were working on that for years.
So you've heard it from Sarah. He's going to be world famous soon.
Oh,
so
yeah,
make sure to buy his prints now while they're cheap, and then auction them later on.
Exactly, Kirstie. That was my next point. You got ahead of me.
You'll definitely have to let us know if you make it to London, and we can go and grab.
Oh, for sure.
For a cover.
No, and honestly,
photographs.
From Barcelona to London is easy, and it is a city I want to go back to. I'm fascinated by London, by England, so that will happen for sure.
Cool.
Sarah, do you have any more questions?
I think just the vegan utopia. Please tell us more about that.
Oh yes, the vegan utopia. Let me show you some stuff from the vegan utopia. Vegan utopia art. This one, artworks, JPEGs. So the vegan utopia was born. Oh no, it's not this one, is it? Yeah, was born from. So I was vegetarian for 9 years, since 2010 to 2019, because of the animals. And then in 2019, I had this insight that I wish I had before, and I realized being vegetarian was not enough if I was doing it for the animals, and I went vegan. So when you go vegan for the animals and you realize what we're doing to them and what's going on, like, for millennia, it's very sad, very worrying, and at the same time it's like, we can do it better, we can do it different, and it's not that hard, really. It isn't. So I after like writing long text on stories in Instagram and bothering people in all the ways that I could about showing them that they should go vegan, why they should go vegan, I realized I should employ my energy into a better way. So I came up with this project called the Vegan Utopia. And what it is, it's like a platform to investigate the veganism, like its possible problems, its difficulties, its advantages, its necessity, and to present it in a artistic way as much as possible. So I align my pictures with veganism. So and then we promote exhibitions every 2 or 3 months on our platform that are related to veganism. The first exhibition was my own with this series of pictures of animals that I had, and then I blended them with drawings to convey some sort of concept. But yeah, beyond this artistic part is really about just bringing veganism to the conversation, making it easier, making it pleasantful. And it's really like something that took over my life in a way that I was not expecting 3 years ago. And it gave me a purpose that, before going vegan, my purpose was only becoming a great photographer. I want to also become a cinematographer, do cinema someday. I already do video, but I have to explore more that part. And before going vegan, my purpose was getting better at those. But then going vegan and realizing what we're doing to the animals and how we can do different, and how that's just a matter of information and the creation of empathy, of respect to other animals. I just felt like an urge to serve that cause as much as I could, and to just like dedicate myself to that. So I do work on it every day, and I'm always trying to produce new content. I have others on board with me. I'm not alone on the project, but yeah, mostly I'm like, I would say more than 50% of the Vegan Utopia is me. And I want to actually reduce that. I would like to be 30% of the project and have more vegans aboard to contribute with their own visions of veganism, with their own ways to explore arguments and ways to bring people towards it. Because veganism is still something that people either consider too hard, or they don't consider it necessary. They're like, yeah, but I'm already vegetarian. If vegetarianism was okay, it would be the vegetarian utopia, and that's not the case. So yeah, I could talk forever about veganism. It's a subject that even more than photography now, it makes me like just want to like go vegan. And so I'll limit my answer to this, and yeah, to show you these pictures of animals, wild animals, some of them, because I think one of our main misconceptions is that only wild animals deserve to live free. But like, what about cows and sheep and chicken? Do they have feelings too? Do they feel pain? It does it justify to make them objects while we can have a perfectly healthy diet only from plants? So yeah, that's Vegan Utopia for you in a nutshell. I would invite you to explore more the web, theveganutopia.com.
That's very cool. And I think it's making the subject accessible and kind of more thought-provoking than I think sometimes people recoil at the heavy-handed approach of veganism and like the introduction to it, but that it's just like, see this, take it away, have a think about it. And if you handle it that way with some people, sometimes you get a bit further.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. No, like you're probably referring to those who approach veganism into showing people the violence behind it, and those videos, of animals being treated the way they are. And I think that's also important to exist. So we need to see those realities to understand them. And I am glad there are many activists that do there. I always mention Anonymous for the Voiceless, one of the groups that I most admire in this regard. But I'm trying to cover another niche, which is to approach veganism from a more positive perspective, a more cheerful and colorful perspective, but not to counterpoint that other way of bringing it, but to bring it together. Like, I think I sometimes like to remind people, hey, the Vegan Utopia, you will find beautiful things, but have you taken a look at this? Have you seen what's going on? So it's good to have that other type of language coming up for the animals, because that's what we're doing. We're trying to speak for the animals.
Yeah, Absolutely.
I think it's a really interesting way to go about it. I mean, you can talk until you're blue in the face and people won't listen, but art seems to bridge those types of conversations to a point
be,
where
yeah.
you both can look and both understand exactly what's happening, and for them to be able to make a informed decision without talking yourself hoarse.
Informed decisions. That's exactly what I'm trying to say, to do, you know, to bring information so that people can realize by themselves that why not, you know, like, why am I not vegan yet? What's stopping me? Is it, you know, like, to make people question. So yeah, art can offer that bridge.
Well, it's been absolutely phenomenal having you on, and I'm just amazed by your photography. I could look at it all day. And if people wanted to follow you on Instagram or social media, what are your tags?
Yeah, it's my surname, Schietti, SCHIETTI, Schietti.
Fantastic.
That's my Instagram. And then on Facebook, I'm Vitor Schietti, which is Victor without the C. But yeah, mainly I use Instagram. And then there's my website, Schietti Fotografia, which is photography in Portuguese.com.
Fantastic.
We urge you all to go and have a look.
And if you enjoyed this video, please do make sure to like it, share it, comment, and join in with our art challenges. Now tonight we're not got an art challenge, we've got art homework. And Sarah, what was we doing again?
Something to do with exposure and use of light creatively. So kind of change, you know, go away, play with the settings, just experiment, have fun, and see what you can come up with.
And if you've come up with anything exciting or terrible, please do make sure to send it to us or tag us in it, and we will reshare it. Me and Sarah will be posting our experiments with the exposure triangle over the next week, which I'm so excited with, because it's been a very long time since I have attempted any form of photography. So yeah, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Yeah,
Victor.
thank you so much.
Thank you, Kirstie.
It's getting late.
Yeah, because my name doesn't have the C, but I put the C to make it easier, you know, like you should be Vitor, but people have trouble saying Vitor, so Victor is fine.
Yeah, I always remember that I had a friend growing up spelled exactly the same way as yours, but he always called himself Vitor. So
really?
that's
He called
where I've come
himself
from.
Vitor.
Yeah.
But where was he from?
Oh, he was from Boston, where I grew up in England.
Okay.
We're a multinational
Okay, so he was in English
town.
already. So that's interesting, because he got a
English pronunciation.
That's interesting.
Well, yes, I hope you have a wonderful evening, and we'll speak to you soon.
Great talking to you.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation. See you.
Right, we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.